Today we're going to be talking about where I'm at with a 10 to 12 person dining table, a CN table, my time at the White Sands National Park, my very first live stream experience, and new changes coming to my YouTube channel. I'll also be answering my #1 question of all time: how did I got into woodworking? Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Woodworker's Diary. I'm Clara Kim, and we are first gonna talk about the dining table. Since the last episode, I have applied black tinted resin on both sides of the tabletop, let that cure, and started work on the table legs. On one of my short videos, I posted about the trapezoidal shape of the legs and asked what people usually called it. The bat wing was a clear winner in my book. But I do have to say there were a few clever plays on the concept of how the shape was missing a side, like halfazoid, freazoid, and my favorite of these submissions, trapezoid. And speaking of these table legs, I'd originally thought to build the bat wings by creating 3 separate sections. But since I have been able to locate a white belt sander to use, which, by the way, I have you guys to thank for helping me find one, I decided to change course and glue all 3 sections together to make 2 big boards. That way, I can also send them through the white belt sander and know that I'm gonna get a smooth and consistent result with both wings. I haven't reached out to set up a time yet, but I'm excited to set that up soon. So, the table is definitely coming along smoothly, but the other thing I've been occupied with is my second project, the CN table. I have, for the most part, finished most of this project, but I have also discovered and learned some interesting things while working on it. Right now, my client and I are on the stage of figuring out the stain and color. So, what that means is that I've been sending stain samples to them and getting feedback to make adjustments. I've also been talking back and forth with Odie's Oil, and one of the things they've introduced me to is their color staining lineup. Before I go into this, I first want to say that I'm not sponsored by Odie's, but they did send me some samples of their color pigments so that I could understand a little more of how their product works. And while I'll probably end up one day making an episode experimenting with Odie's Oil in general, in this video, I wanted to at least share a little bit of what I'm realizing about their color pigments. Odie's Oil has a wide array of color pigments available in their lineup. First with the primary colors, then branching off into many more interesting sounding colors like espresso, terracotta, and pecan. To use them, you essentially have to think like a painter, an artist, or a colorist, if you will, by mixing together pigments along with their finishing. This to me was a bit of an eye-opener. With other companies, you usually have a set number of colors that you can choose from. And while you can blend those together to make a new colors, the pigments from Odie's feel like they're meant to be blended together. By figuring out your own ratio and weight of pigments to mix together, approaching staining with Odie's inherently means an infinite number of results. There's a big part of this that makes me feel like I'd essentially be like a mad scientist, concocting different blends to get a very specific color that I might be wanting, or even creating my own signature color series. So anyways, that's where I currently am with the project, and I'll definitely be talking more about my findings here as time goes on. As the month of March drew closer to an end, and by the way, it's crazy that it's already April, isn't it? I also got the opportunity to take a little break and visit White Sands National Park. My sister and her husband have already been married since 2020, but because of COVID delays, they had to postpone everything, including their ceremony, until this summer. Which, side note, their wedding is going to be in Korea, so for about a month, I'll be over there. One thing they'd been thinking about for a while were wedding pictures. So, fun fact, in Korea, at least in my experience, engagement parties and photos are not really a thing. Instead of engagement photos, I found that most couples do wedding photos. It'll usually be a completely separate event and will always be before the wedding day itself. You'll see those wedding photos on all of their invitations and on all of the other media the day of. And back in January, when my partner and I were in LA, my sister asked us if we'd be willing to meet up with them at White Sands to help them with wedding pictures. My partner was quite surprised because he knew it meant that he'd be the photographer for the event, and responded with, "I really like photography and videography, but I don't know if I'd consider myself as good as a lot of the pros out there. My sister's response was, I've seen the pictures you take for my sisters and those are good enough. So the challenge and mission was accepted. At first, my partner was crazy excited and nervous about the opportunity. On our way back to Houston, he'd researched quite a few wedding photos to kind of internalize types of shots to try and get. But when we finally got home, our workload has instantaneously doubled and stayed like that for the next month and a half. It wasn't until quite literally we got into the car to hit the road that he finally started thinking about photos again. We first made our way towards El Paso, but before making it all the way there, we parked in Walmart parking lot and passed out for the night. Once we woke up, we got some coffee, worked on a little bit of video editing, had some breakfast, and then hit the road towards El Paso to pick up my sister and brother-in-law from the airport. From there, we drove onward another hour and a half to Alamogordo, New Mexico, where the beautiful national park exists. The White Sands National Park was breathtaking. While driving into the park, there's a point where you see a sign that says pavement ends. At first we were like, wait, what does that mean? And then we saw where it broke off and kaboom! We were then driving on packed sand for the rest of the way. We were all going, oh, and whoa! There were huge sand dunes on either side of us, and while the sand sparkled, it really made you feel like you were driving through mountains of snow. One thing that was crazy though was how cold it was. My partner and I got our first taste of how cold the desert can be at Joshua Tree National Park. I remember thinking, man, it's a desert, how cold can it get? And I completely underdressed. One of the worst decisions I've ever made. For the White Sands, I'd learned my lesson and layered up with the intent of taking off layers on the chance that it got warmer. My sister though took on the cold like a champ. For the morning shoot, she had a thin blue dress on and the temperature was 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold! Despite all these beautiful pictures we were able to capture, she was freezing. Every time her feet dug into the sand, she would let out a ee! Because for her, she said it felt like she was digging her feet into ice. Another interesting thing about desert temperatures is just how much and how quickly it can fluctuate. From 35 degrees in the morning, it eventually reached the mid-60s and maybe even 70s by 2 p.m. None of us could bear to wear more than a t-shirt. Once it hit about 4 p.m., the wind started to steadily pick up in strength, and once the sun started to set around 7 and 8 p.m., the temperature started to once again drop to the 30s and 40s. Funny enough, the best pictures of the day were, of course, during the coldest moments of the day. Overall, it was an amazing time, and I think he got some great pictures. When we made our way back to Houston, we stopped by the White Sands one more time and got to do some sand sledding. A kind couple let us use their wax stick, which, if you ever try it, is the key to getting a smooth and fast ride down a dune. This was fun, but it may not have been the best idea because it put more sand in our pockets. And yes, we're still finding sand in random places today. After finally making it back home, I got back into the swing of woodshop life and eventually convinced myself to try out something that I've been dodging for the longest time: live streaming. It took me quite a while to get comfortable enough to talk to the camera, but live streaming, the idea of that brought some next level anxiety. But somehow I found some bravery and mustered up the courage to do it. And it was actually kind of fun. Originally, I planned to do a live stream for my Patreon members only, but I ended up doing one for my Discord crew as well as Instagram. It was pretty cool to finally put a face to some people that I've been chatting back and forth with. You get to pick up a little more than what you can gather through text. Also, it was exciting that people in the chat room got to meet each other too. I don't know how I'll exactly be implementing this more yet, but I do plan on making this a more regular activity to do, at least with my Patreon members and Discord. Along with my growth and breaking out of my introverted shell, my YouTube channel will be undergoing some changes too. In the upcoming weeks, expect to see weekly releases of the projects that I'm working on and the stages they are at. I'll be breaking up the videos into parts, like part 1, part 2, part 3, And after the entire project is done, we will also be releasing one big comprehensive video for those who'd rather watch everything in one go. In addition to this, I will also be dialing back the frequency of my Woodworker's Diary episodes to once a month. That way, I can spend more time on the projects. And every Woodworker's Diary episode will end up containing a whole lot more content. In a strange way, while this change will mean more videos, it actually puts me in a better position to create a more suitable work-life balance. As you know, we've been struggling to create a good system, but we have high hopes that this new style will work. I'll try it out for a few weeks, and if you have any thoughts whatsoever, let me know in the comments, in the Discord, or wherever suits you best. And now, let's move on to the biggest topic of the day. How did I get into woodworking? But first, I'd like to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video. Just kidding, I still don't have a sponsor. But hey, I gotta practice this, right? And who knows, maybe sending this energy out into the universe may help with attracting this back into my life. Okay, so the very first time I did any kind of woodworking was in Korea. I just got my associate degrees from Hanyang Women University and was mentally preparing to transfer to another university. To prepare, I enrolled in a study group that helped you study for the tests and build a portfolio. One of the assignments in this group was to carve 2 sculptures with wood. His reasoning was, it's good to have variety of work in your portfolio. At this point, I had zero experience with wood and had absolutely zero clue as to what I was doing. I picked up the chisel, started working, and then nicked myself. Afterwards, I ended up getting some intense skin rashes on my neck that lasted for about half a year or so. I'm pretty sure it was wood poisoning. And I ended up dropping out of the study group because I couldn't find the worth in transferring to another university in Korea, and of course, the wood poisoning. So that was strike 1 for wood. Instead of attending the other university in Korea, I instead got into the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And it was here that I had my next encounter with wood. I took a Sculpture 101 class where you get to learn the basics of all mediums: wood, metal, fiber, and etc. The assignment for the wood sculpture portion was to make a vessel with a drawer. It was a conceptual project, so functionality was not the point. Because I don't have any pictures of it, I decided to draw what I made. I stacked up some plywood, cut out a drawer, stacked on some more plywood, and that was it. Yep, pretty terrible. I remember really disliking this project, so to me, that was strike number 2. After these 2 terrible experiences, I kind of unofficially decided that I would never make anything with wood. There was a moment I thought, alright, so woodworking is definitely off my list. I never encountered wood again until a few years later when one of my good friends recommended to me a woodworking class. She'd taken it over winter break and was very happy about it. She talked a lot about the instructor and how cool, caring, and knowledgeable he was. She talked so much and so highly about it that it got me curious. How awesome could this instructor actually be? I thought. When I looked into the class, I found out that his class, Twist and Route, was one that would always fill up as soon as enrollment began. So on one semester, I was able to get an early pick on classes, and out of curiosity, I decided to pick it. You'd think that a person who has had 2 bad experiences with wood already would probably want to take a beginner class or a 101 class instead. Yeah, no. I'm definitely dense and completely absurd sometimes. This intermediate class teaches you all the techniques of manipulating wood shapes by using router and steam or dry bending. And yeah, I sucked. I had literally failed to complete every single project besides the very first one. It's very embarrassing, to be honest, but the thing is, the instructor never once changed his attitude towards me. Regardless of if you failed to complete 1, 2, 3, or more projects, he was still very encouraging and always tried his best to help you through the processes. And even with all the encouragement and help, I tanked. Big time. And once that semester was over, that's when everything started to change. Before this, I specialized in ceramics, And by nature, I found I loved to make functional objects, things you can use and interact with as opposed to art pieces that you can only look at. After reflecting on my experiences from the class, despite having failed everything, I realized that I could now quite literally make anything. After the epiphany, the first thing that popped into my mind was a loft bed, which was a childhood dream of mine. I'd always wanted one, but there's never a really good reason to drop that much money on one. I had nothing to do for the entire summer, so I decided to go ahead and try to make one. After 3 long months planning and building everything myself, I had finally completed my loft bed. I was speechless. There was a sense of pride, of astonishment, and an overwhelming feeling of accomplishment. I'd made something that I'd only dreamed of become a reality, and it was something I could use, touch, and interact with. My dream had literally come true. I think it was this moment that my fire and passion for woodworking ignited into a roaring and unstoppable flame. From here, I took 2 more woodworking classes, Woodworking 101 and the Fundamentals of Furniture Making. To this day, I think it's funny I took Woodworking 101 after taking the intermediate class. But learning the basics in anything is important, you know? And not to brag, but I became the rock star in both classes. Okay, maybe a little bit of bragging. I think it was the combined experiences of having tanked everything in the intermediate class and spending 3 long months getting familiar with the machinery. In my fundamentals class, I learned the basics of furniture design and also met a really awesome mentor, Seth A. Keller. He wasn't the instructor of the class, but he was the woodshop assistant director, meaning the top person in the woodshop. He had a fun way of explaining processes, and he was also really into helping students. After these classes, I'd become solid with my basics, and still, I continued to explore and learn. Working in the woodshop as a student worker, taking on a job as a woodshop supervisor, working in a small business woodshop, and eventually here today, starting my own woodshop 7 years later. After this entire journey, I really started believing the saying, third time's a charm. And it's crazy to think back on it all. If I decided to go to another university in Korea, I might not even be here today. Just one simple change, one decision, one event could have changed the entire course of my life. But I'm glad that everything has grown the way that it has, and I'm glad I'm here today. Still chasing after my curiosities, connecting with you all, and turning my dreams and visions into reality. So, what did I learn from all this? Number 1, my partner and I really love adventuring, and we miss it. Our time at the White Sands made us realize how much we love going around and seeing new things. And we want to work hard to be able to have more of these experiences. Number 2, fear is what I create, not what I'm born with. Throughout my life, I've been bold and brave in a variety of situations, like traveling to foreign countries by myself or jumping into new experiences like starting a new business. But I've also learned that I do get scared and worried about things that I have no reason to be. Live streaming, talking to the camera, I remember feeling so scared and uncomfortable to do both of these things. And after starting both, I found myself relaxing in a matter of minutes. The fear was all in my head. It's made me react irrationally, including getting mad at my partner for suggesting these ideas. Of course, getting over these fears isn't something I'll be able to beat with a snap of my fingers, but I can at least take my time to relax and work towards it, bit by bit and step by step. So yeah, that's it for this week. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in the next Woodworker's Diary, let me know in the comments below. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next episode. Welcome to my post-show shout-out session, the part where I do raffles and give away free tools to people who comment and tag someone. Yay! Just kidding again, but brands? That could have been you. Let me know. But back to the actual important people. You all, thank you for staying with me all the way. And for today's shout-out session, I wanted to give a special thanks to my newest Patreon members, Garrick and Adam. Thank you guys. Yay! So after testing out the last live stream, I found that it was actually really fun. I'll be posting in the Patreon feed again to vote for when we can do another one to hang out and just talk about anything. If you too are interested in supporting my woodworking, my channel, and my life journey overall, do consider joining my Patreon group, where for as much as a cup of coffee, you could really be supporting my growth. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode. Spending 3 long months. Try to pronounce months. Months.
You th and then you s.
Months.
Yeah.
Months.
Months.
Okay. Say spending 3 long months. Say
Spending 3 long months.
months. Spending 3 long months. Spending 3 long months. 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 Spending 3 long months.
Yeah.
I don't hear the difference.